Hello, this is your host. Today, we're going to be talking about barges. Barges are flat-bottom boats that are used for transporting goods. They typically come in two varieties. There's the dry cargo barge and there's the liquid cargo barge. We're not going to be talking about the liquid cargo barge today. We're going to be talking about the dry cargo barge. The dry cargo barge is typically used to transport things like gravel, sand, grain, coal, or any other dry good. A single dry cargo barge can carry 200 to 300 rail cars worth of material. The capacity of a barge is measured in tons, and a typical barge might have a capacity of 1,500 tons. Sometimes barges will have a crane on them to load and unload goods, especially if they're carrying something like gravel or sand. A crane is not always necessary, though. If they're carrying something like grain, which is easily poured out of the top, then they don't necessarily need a crane. But when they do use cranes, they typically have a crawler crane which is mounted on the deck of the barge. This crane is used to load and unload goods onto the barge. The actual size of a barge can vary, but they're usually around 195 feet long by 35 feet wide. They're relatively shallow draft vessels. That means they're not very deep in the water. They usually have a draft of about 8 feet. The shallow draft means that they are able to go into relatively shallow areas, and they are also able to travel on rivers where the river might not be very deep. There are three main sections of a barge. There is the bow or the front of the vessel. There is the amidships, which is the middle section, and then there is the stern, which is the back section. At the front of the barge you would find things like the anchor and the mooring equipment. Then towards the back of the barge you would typically find things like the engine room, the wheelhouse, and the living quarters for the crew. Typically, a crew of 4 people operates a barge. You have a captain, you have a mate, you have an engineer, and you have a deckhand. But sometimes crews can be larger depending on the type of work that they're doing. For example, if they're doing salvage work, they may have a larger crew. Also, the crew is going to spend a lot of time working outside on the deck of the vessel, so that's very common for them to have injuries. When they get injured, they're going to need medical attention. When they need medical attention, they can contact the nearest port, and the nearest port is going to dispatch a rapid response team to come out and see the crew member. One thing that makes operating a barge unique is the fact that oftentimes they're re-towing multiple barges at once. When you're towing multiple barges, you need to make sure that everything is lined up properly. You need to make sure that the front of each barge is lined up with the back of the previous barge. You need to make sure that the vessel that's towing the barges is lined up with the barges themselves. It's kind of like a big tug and multiple children are holding hands and marching in a line. Everyone needs to stay in line, everyone needs to stay in formation. If you've ever seen a barge on the water before, you might have noticed that there are doors on the side of the barge. These doors are used to load and unload the barge. They can either open the doors from the inside of the barge or they can open them from the outside. And these doors help to make loading and unloading much easier. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give us a like and we'll see you next time.